We've now solemnly begun the greatest and the holiest week of our entire liturgical life as Catholics, with Holy Week, rightly so called because of the holiness of these great days. And we always kick it off and begin with Palm Sunday, which its formal name is Palm Sunday of the Lord's Passion. In English, the word passion has two senses. It means suffering, and it means intense love. The word passion means suffering and intense love. So it is through his suffering, intense suffering, that the Son of God reveals his intense love for each of us, for all of us sinners. And we begin Palm Sunday with a beautiful procession, which we just did. And we remember Palm Sunday so well, the palm branches and the singing and the chanting. And it's always begun with a very festive and joyful celebration of this procession. But the meaning of the procession and the context in which Jesus enters Jerusalem, which we commemorate today, can often be lost to us. Now, prior to Palm Sunday, the Pharisees and the chief priests and the temple authorities had already decided to put Jesus to death. And if we read the Gospels, all of them leading up to the Passion narratives, we learn that the climate around Jesus had become very hostile. Already, different times, Jesus' life was in danger. Already, different times, they tried to stone Jesus to death. So it became so hostile that the gospel writers will tell us that Jesus no longer moved about in public, but only moved about secretly and remained hidden. Yet today, he makes a grand entrance into the city of Jerusalem. Jesus knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly every choice he made and how he would enter Jerusalem. He did so intentionally. He knew what he was doing. And so let's understand the historical context of what is actually going on this Palm Sunday. The first is we can look at the animal that Jesus chose to ride upon, the mule, the donkey. Why is this significant? If we look to the first book of Kings, we would read that King David said, "Call to Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet." And the king said to them, "Take with you the servants of your Lord, and cause my son Solomon to ride on my own mule. Blow the trumpet and say, 'Long live King Solomon.'" So having Solomon ride on King David's own donkey meant that Solomon was the new king of Israel. Solomon literally was the son of David. He was David's son, and he's now the king, the new king of Israel. And they were to know this by riding on King David's mule. The mule meant, "Here comes the king." And the crowd shouted when Jesus arrived, "Hosanna to the Son of David." Jesus, so often called in the Gospels, Son of David, for truly he was. Hosanna meant the king has arrived. It was a victorious cry. Jesus and all the Jews of his day knew exactly what riding into Jerusalem on a mule would mean. Jesus is proclaiming that he's the King of the Jews, and he's riding into his own capital city, the city of kings, Jerusalem. And all the people then took palm branches, and palm branches are symbolic of victory, most specifically a military victory. So taking off palm branches and waving them around in the Jewish biblical mind would have reminded them of centuries earlier of the great Maccabean revolt, where Judas Maccabeus and his brothers revolted against the Seleucid Empire that had been oppressing them. They had overtaken the temple, and Judas Maccabeus and his brothers revolted against that regime, got back the temple, rededicated it, reconsecrated it, restored it, and we call that feast today Hanukkah, if you're from Jewish background. And so they would have remembered that victory, that insurrection against the Seleucids, and Judas Maccabeus and his revolt, with the waving of palm branches, which is what they did at that victory. And now the Roman Empire in Jesus' day is the dominant power in the world. Rome ruled the world literally. It was the dominant power that was now oppressing the Jewish nation. And so waving palm branches in the city of Jerusalem under Roman rule would have not been seen as some little festival parade, but rather signaling and a warning that perhaps Somebody is planning an insurrection against the Roman Empire. Is it this guy riding in here on this donkey? And then the Jewish mind could have possibly been asking themselves, is this Jesus of Nazareth coming to lead another military victory to get us finally free out of the oppression of the Roman Empire? And now we can take the feast of the Passover, which Palm Sunday precedes. We know this is days before the feast of Passover. And for us in our minds, Passover can be some kind of just religious festival. But that's not what it was. Remember, if we go back, remember where the Passover occurred was this God's deliverance of his people from oppression, from slavery. Recall, the king of Egypt was Pharaoh and the Egyptians. Remember, they enslaved the Hebrew people and threw out overboard into the water the firstborn son of every Hebrew woman. This is what the Pharaoh was doing. They were totally enslaved. And so Moses led them to freedom by God's power. So remember the 10 plagues and the angel of death and the Exodus. So this is where the Passover feast originates, all about God's deliverance of his people from oppression. So you would assume then that Passover would be a nice time for the Jewish people to rise up against the oppressing forces, and they did. There were other men, other leaders, somewhat self-proclaimed messiahs, who would try to lead an insurrection against Rome to get the temple back and to free the Hebrew people from their oppression. And Rome responded the same way to all those who led any type of insurrection: crucifixion. It was the most horrific, torturous, brutal way to die, which Rome perfected. Said, if you try to rise up against us, this will happen to you. They did it publicly, they did it on streets, they did it all the time to show the people, don't mess with Rome. It's really a clear message. And so this is the context in which Jesus is riding into Jerusalem. And then we have somebody else who's also riding into Jerusalem from the west, Pontius Pilate, who would be sent into Jerusalem with his riding in on his military horse, surrounded with the army of Rome and all of its military might, publicly coming into the city to remind people who's in charge here, who's going to be keeping law and order here, will be Pontius Pilate. He's coming in with all of his military force around him. And he comes into the city to put down rebellions. If anybody starts to get out of line, this is what happens. And so then we move into the Passion. And we understand that Jesus on Palm Sunday was doing everything intentionally, proclaiming the truth about who he was and what he was coming to do. He was coming to lay down his life, to offer the gift of his intense love. And Palm Sunday isn't some made-up festival thing that we Christians just kind of do. It is absolutely rooted in history, in time and context, which we've just learned this morning. And the religious leaders of the Jewish people and the Roman rulers collude together with Judas Iscariot. These people are enemies, but today they become friends because they share a common goal: put Jesus to death. And what do they have in common with each other? These Jewish leaders and the Roman rulers? Fear. They all fear Jesus. What is this man coming to do? What is his plan? Jesus comes to give his life, to offer his life in intense love. That's his plan. And so that's how the Pharisees and the temple rulers and Rome responded to Jesus. So how will we respond to Christ this Holy Week? And so we can briefly look at three figures in the Passion narrative that are unique to Mark's gospel. The first is the young man in the linen garment. And only Mark mentions a young man wearing nothing but a single linen garment who runs away when the police try to grab him. Tradition holds that this man is Mark himself. He wrote himself into the gospel in this event to say, I was there and I failed. He ran away out of fear, totally naked. And so have we not been like Mark? Have we not often not stood with Christ, not remained in solidarity with him, counted the cost. What's it going to cost me to follow Christ all the way? And we turn and run. Then there's Simon of Cyrene, who's pressed into service. Now, nobody in their right mind would want to be near a crucifixion. But Simon happened to be pulled in, drug in to the whole mess, pressed into helping Christ carry his cross. And at that moment, at a chance encounter with Jesus, this man, Simon, heard Christ's voice, looked in his eyes, and saw his face. And it transformed him. This chance encounter. He was reluctant. He didn't want to be there. And so many of us can be that way too, right? Here we are at Mass. This is the Sunday where there's a really long gospel. My mom makes me go to church. I go to church all the time because I'm made to with my family. I'm here reluctantly. I'm forced into this. But maybe this is the Sunday where we have a chance encounter with Christ that transforms us. And so how was it that Simon was transformed? The gospel tells us that Simon of Cyrene was the father of these two men, Alexander and Rufus, his sons, which tradition tells us later became Christian leaders in the early church. They were converted. Not only Simon of Cyrene, but his family was totally transformed because of this chance encounter of Christ in the middle of his passion. Maybe this is the chance encounter for our family this Sunday, to have a transforming encounter with Christ. Finally, the Roman centurion. A Roman centurion soldier was over 100 other soldiers. These men were like Marines. You didn't mess around with them. And this particular Roman centurion was entrusted with overseeing the execution of Jesus to his crucifixion. And then when Jesus breathed his last, this Roman centurion said these words, "Truly, this was the Son of God." The gospel of Jesus Christ, his message, had reached all the way in to the Roman Empire and converted this centurion, this Roman, this brutal man. And maybe this is our Sunday to, for once in our life, say with all the conviction of our heart, mind, body, and soul that truly this is the Son of God. And then everything changes. You see, there's a place for all of us in the Passion. Jesus reveals in his Passion his intense love for us, and this unfolds for us like no other during Holy Week. So may we accompany Christ all the way to Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and the Easter Vigil, ready to receive the intense love Jesus desires us to receive. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.